what's up guys? My name is Zach and today I am driving a 1985 Merkur XR4Ti. Up front is a 2.3 liter turbocharged inline 4 and down below is a 5-speed manual transmission. Now I am super excited to be driving this Merkur because it is a very rare vehicle and we'll get into that in just a second, but I'm always excited to be driving something rare here on the channel and this is quite the rare bird to find. But if you would like to submit your own vehicle, you can head on over to my website zackprato.com/submit. It's a quick and easy submission form. It takes under a minute to fill out, and I come out to you. But let's talk about Merkur. Why does this look like a Ford Sierra? Well, it pretty much is. So, back in the 1980s, there was a big draw for auto companies to start making luxury brands. We saw this a lot with the Japanese brands like Nissan making Infiniti, Toyota making Lexus, and Honda making Acura. European cars were selling really well here. So everyone wanted a piece of the pie, including Ford. So Ford, under the Mercury Lincoln marquise, created a new company called Merkur. It was meant to rival European imports in terms of luxury and sportiness. How they did this is that they actually brought European Ford models over here into the States, Americanized them, make sure that they were federally legal, and sold them as Merkurs. There were two Merkur models, this and the Scorpio, which came later in 1988 and only lasted 2 model years. But today we're talking about the XR4Ti. But let's get back to that 2.3 liter turbocharged inline 4 under the hood. Well, that was a big part of the federalization of this vehicle. So overseas, the Ford Sierra actually got a 2.8 liter V6. However, that engine wouldn't pass American emissions, so they took an engine that already had been in the States, the SVO Mustang 2.3 Turbo, and put it into this vehicle. That does mean that it is relatively easy to get parts for it because we had Mustangs and Thunderbirds with this engine, so it's not anything too new to us. However, these do have head gasket issues, which, isn't great. Like I said, paired to it is a 5-speed manual transmission. It has a decent click into gear. I like it an okay amount. I don't love it though. However, it does feel on brand with the other European vehicles that it was trying to compete against back in the 80s. So it does work in that way. Last but not least about the Merkur is the fact that it is rear wheel drive. So how does it feel to drive a Merkur XR4Ti? Well, it actually does kind of drive and handle like a BMW E30 or a 190e of that generation. Now, obviously, they aren't the exact same cars, but the way that the steering feels, the way that the shifter feels, the way that the throttle feels, it all feels very similar to the vehicles of that era. And so, from that standpoint, it does actually make sense. The ride is actually relatively bouncy and cushy, which isn't super sporty, which is what they were going for, but hey, I'll take it. Visibility is good because it is an 80s car, very thin A-pillars, which I always love. And overall, I'm having a pretty good time driving this XR4Ti. With that stuff out of the way, let's talk about the interior. Well, in front of me, I have a bunch of physical gauges. Off to the left is my speedometer. In the center, I get my coolant temperature and fuel. And off to the right, we have our turbo boost pressure, as well as our tachometer. And we have the gauge dimmer switch and wipers down below the gauge cluster. The steering wheel just has a Merkur badge on it, nothing too crazy there, and a horn. Still works. Off to the left, we do have our fog light switch, rear wiper, and rear defrost, as well as a climate vent. And moving on to the door, we have our power mirror options and latch to get in and out, but that's it. Moving into the center, we have 2 climate control vents, our warning lights. Very interesting to see them here in the center. In the 70s and 80s, because warning lights were becoming more standardized, a lot of different makers kind of put them wherever. So I guess Merkur thought it was a good place to put them here. We do have a digital clock down below, which is nice. Also get this really cool wire diagram of the car that shows you which doors are open, which is super neat. And we have our climate controls off to the left, at least for temperature. But then moving down below, we have our fan speed and AC, an aftermarket radio, fade and balance, and some cassette tape holders. We also do have a pull-out ashtray and our heated seats. So This does have heated seats in 1985. It might be the oldest vehicle I've ever reviewed with heated seats, which is really cool to see. However, there was actually an issue with the heated seats. There was a story of a guy who turned on his heated seat and it actually melted his seat in a Merkur. So, how true is that? Was it his own fault? I don't know, but it's a part of the Merkur's lore, nevertheless. Then we have the shifter. The shift pattern on the top is a little strange because they didn't draw the lines between the gears. Kind of an odd looking shifter. However, it works. And like I said, I don't love the feeling of it, but I also don't hate it. I think it works all right, and that's all I can ask for. Then we do have our window switches, which are unlabeled. Parking brake, and that's it, meaning there are no factory cup holders here in the 1985 Merkur XR4Ti. So unfortunately, yet very predictably, it fails the big friggin' bottle test. Now, the seats are decently comfortable. I do like them. However, like I said, the heated seats are a little dangerous, but they at least have them. And honestly, they're more comfortable than sporty, which I know, like, you know, they were trying to make a sporty vehicle. I think these seats definitely are more cushy than anything, but I don't mind them. They've been comfortable in my time with the Merkur, and that's all I can ask for. However, speaking of seats, even though this is a coupe, we do have back seats, so let's go do a back seat review. All right, we're in the back of the Merkur, which was not easy to do, and it's a coupe. The headliner is sagging a little bit, but the roof does come down this low. It's not very comfortable. You know, this is a really driver-oriented, front two occupants thought about. With the seat back where it would normally be, it wouldn't be the end of the world. I would have some space back here. It's just not a very happy experience. I really wish that we got the 4-door over here, but the Scorpio was a 4-door, and so that kind of filled that gap. Of course, that didn't come till 3 years after this car. Nothing really too crazy to write home about back here. I can tilt out these back windows if I wanted to, but of course, no power windows beyond that. Let's hop into the very back. We'll take a quick look at the trunk and cargo space, and then we'll talk about the looks. Right around the back of the Merkur XR4Ti, and I love this double spoiler. I hate the Civic Type R double spoiler, but I love it here. Push a button in and lift. It's a little bit heavy, and of course there are tools back here because it's an 80s car, and of course it needs all the extra tools and help it can get. It is a hatchback though, as you could see, so that is pretty cool. However, not the craziest cargo space. I'm honestly not super impressed with this, although I will say that is a lot of tools, so that does work out a little bit. And we do have our rear wiper fluid back here, which is kind of a cool little position. And again, I love that dual spoiler. Bring it back down. And that is the trunk of a Merkur XR4Ti. Now we gotta talk about the looks, and I love the look of the Merkur for two reasons. First of all, it is a Sierra, and I love the look of the Sierra. I think it's styled really well. I think it's aggressive, but also handsome, and I have to say I'm a big fan, but I also think a big part of that is just seeing the Merkur badges is something so unique and so special that I haven't really done before. Before this video, I hadn't really spent much, if any, time with any Merkur product ever. And so it's always very unique to see that. I do like that it's a 2-door. Overseas, they had a Sierra that was a 4-door and a wagon, but we only ever got the 2-door version here as the Merkur. With all of that being said, let's get on to my final thoughts. What do I think driving my first ever Merkur here on the Shooting Cars channel? Well, I've really enjoyed this experience. If you guys know me personally, you know my favorite cars in the world are the wacky, the weird, and the unloved cars that we just don't see anymore, and this fits pretty much every box I could physically check. The coolest thing about this car, honestly, is the car's history. Ford, who was led at the time by Bob Lutz, wanted to explore the European market and steal some of the success away from Mercedes and BMW, and so this was their answer to that. And it's so interesting just looking at the 80s in retrospect that every company had this kind of idea. Like I said, we had Toyota forming Lexus, Honda forming Acura, Nissan forming Infiniti, and overseas in Japan, we had Mazda forming Afini and Yunos. And so this was their answer to that question. I love that. I love being able to see that, to see the direct roadmap of how they got here in the States. But unfortunately, the Merkur didn't really sell all that well. They were expensive. They didn't have their own dedicated dealers. The name was hard to say. And the XR4Ti was named that way because GMC already had the Sierra name for their pickup trucks. And Oldsmobile also had a Sierra. Although it was spelled different, they still had a Sierra. So they had to name it something else, which it was called the XR4i overseas, and they added the T because it got a turbo 4, and it just didn't really have much staying power. And so after the 1989 model year, because the government was requiring passive restraints, whether that be airbags or power seatbelts, it would have meant that Ford had to completely redesign the interior, at least, of the Merkurs, and it just wasn't going to be enough. It's going to be too much money to do that, and Ford just decided to pull the plug instead. So here we are, a car that's stuck in the 80s and never lived out of it. A Peter Pan automobile, if you want to say so, but to me, this is one of the coolest cars I've driven in the last several months. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Huge thank you to Ron for letting me take out his Merkur XR4Ti. I was buzzing all week at the opportunity to drive this. Ron's been absolutely wonderful to work with. We're filming another one of his vehicles later today that you'll see on the channel at some point. But he's super cool, and I appreciate him very, very much. But I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Don't forget to rate the video, comment on the video, and subscribe if you really liked it. Take care, guys.